17 different kinds of mammals. The biggest by far is rodentia, the rodents. And I put a picture of a skull for each one here. Mammals interact with their organism through skulls. They do taxonomy using skulls and tooth patterns and proportions, things like that. So when you do a mammal field guide or look at mammal keys, there's always skulls in it because it's a very distinctive piece of the creature's anatomy. And look at the teeth. Teeth up front for chipping off of things, and then grinding teeth back here for crushing. So these guys are chipping off plant matter and then grinding it. And of course, rodents are mice and prairie dogs and beavers and rats, guinea pigs. Those are rodents. Are rabbits rodents? Rabbits are kind of like guinea pigs in a way. Rabbits are not rodents. I should put a rabbit slide in. Rabbits are a more primitive kind of mammal called a lagomorph. But, very similar niche, but not a rodent. Yeah.
So rodents have the grinding teeth. So do they only have 2 sets of grinding teeth, or do those continually grow?
I mean, they get replaced if they lose one? Oh, I don't think any mammals can replace their teeth.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to look that up. Elephants have a weird situation where the teeth they have I think 7 teeth, one after the other, and when the front pair wears out, another one pushes forward. But that's a weird elephant thing. I'll have to look that up though. Yeah, so I think for some mammal, a small rodent is somebody's meal before he dies of old age. But if you have a pet guinea pig, its teeth might wear out before it dies of other causes. So anyway, their niche is herbivory, mostly small creatures. Biggest rodent are these South American things related to guinea pigs are about this big. The next biggest order is Chiroptera, which is the bats, and that's often a surprise to a lot of people. The bat diversity is pretty high. And look at the name there, 2 Greek words, Chiro and Pteros, and we've met Pteros 100 times. What's Pteros mean? Wing or fin. Chiro usually means hand. Chiroptera, wing hand. And we looked at that earlier and talked about flying. Bats, the fingers, the webbing of the wing is stretched between the fingers. Bats are flying vertebrates, the only group of mammals that flies. And with birds, the only group of other vertebrates that flies. This is a bat skull on a penny. You get an idea that they're fairly small creatures. And look at the teeth there. Most bats eat flying insects, and that's a great set of tools for grabbing a moth or a mosquito, puncturing its exoskeleton and then swallowing it. Most bats are nocturnal, and they have that stereotype, which is true, of roosting in dark places during the day, caves or sometimes trees or in your attic, and they come out at night. I'll let you in on a secret. There's a nice little bat colony on campus. There's probably multiple. I know of one, and I've only been there at the right time. They're there all day, and then they get out and fly. And so you have to be right there at the right time of day or morning or evening to see them in or out. And one day I was there early in the evening, just as it was getting dark, and I saw them leaving. But if you go straight across the street to where the Chaparral Labs are, you picture that, and the old fire station, there's a street that goes between them, which you don't go through because you can't park right there. On the north side of the Chaparral building, under the tiles, there's a bat colony. And I saw them one day, and every time I walk by there, you look at the ground, there's bat poop all over the ground. So anyway, that's kind of a neat little bit of art. I'm just hoping that no one notices that, gets annoyed by it. They're not doing anyone any harm. In Austin, Texas, and places like Carlsbad Caverns, New Mexico, and Austin, Texas, where there are large bat congregations, frequently they become sites of nature watching. And there's this bridge in Austin where the gaps between the structural elements are just the right distance that bats have taken up residence in there after they built that bridge. And it must be noisy with trucks and cars going on all day long. But they live up there in those cracks, and bats are very sensitive to temperature. That space has to be just the right temperature. They're very small, so they lose heat or gain heat very quickly through their small bodies. So they want to roost in just the right temperature, and that is just perfect for them for the climate in Austin, apparently. And every evening, hundreds of thousands of bats leave. And they fly out over Austin and eat literally tons of mosquitoes and flies and moths before they return in the morning. It's kind of a neat thing. The city of Austin built parks along the river shore. And look at all these people. I think that's really neat when people appreciate nature instead of trying to damage it.
There's something like that in Northern California. There's a bridge going into Sacramento.
Oh, is there?
Has the same thing.
Neat. And They're dirty. If you have a colony in your attic, they poop everywhere. They're not dangerous to people, and they're not something to be feared. Although, we've built lots of myths around bats. They're kind of neat, though. But that's the bat. This is the local one. I haven't confirmed that what we have over there, but the most common roosting bat in this part of the world will be this little thing called a free-tailed bat, Tiderida. And you can get an idea of someone's hand how big they are. They're not big. They're like a little bit larger than mice with wings. Kind of neat. Let's say something else about bats that popped up in my brain. Some bats are much larger, like fruit. They're called fruit bats, and they drink nectar from flowers and they eat fruit. A lot of bats are insectivorous, but another wing of the order are nectar drinking. And can you picture the saguaro cactus in Sonoran Desert, the big thing that's in all the cartoons? That makes these huge white flowers, and it's pollinated at night by a fruit bat that sticks its nose down in those flowers and drinks the nectar. I have to put pictures of that. Insectivora is another one of our orders, and the name gives it away. These are shrews and moles. This is a mole here, and this is a shrew. They're little insectivores. And they're eating insects and spiders and snails and earthworms. And look at the skull there, arrayed with a whole bunch of really needle-sharp teeth for punching exoskeletons before they swallow them. A medium-sized order there. Moles have, I gotta get a better picture of a mole, these huge paddle-like front limbs because they dig, they burrow through soft soil and capture earthworms. And when I lived in Ohio for a few years, I had a house with a big, huge yard with a stream in the back and a forest. And the part of my yard that was lawn had moles in it. And Midwesterners hate moles. It's just like this they hate them. Hate squirrels and deer, too. They hate wildlife. And whereas I would put salt licks out for the deer, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? We don't want deer here. They eat our tulips. And they kill the moles. They put mole traps in the ground to kill their gophers and moles. And my yard was always a mole sanctuary. And, they'd make these little tracks in the lawn. You just go out in the morning and tamp them down. It's okay. It's all good. But apparently my neighbors thought I was a little bit touched. The charismatic megamammals are in the order Carnivora. And again, the name is telling you a little bit about them. They're carnivores, and these are the big predaceous animals, and small ones too. So it's the bear family, the cat family, the dog family, weasels. What else can we think of? Ferrets and weasels, raccoons. Big group of primarily carnivorous mammals. I can't think of any herbivorous ones, although you know that bears are omnivores. Anything he put in his mouth, he's going to eat. So look at the skull there. It's a lion skull. And again, canine teeth for grabbing another mammal usually and causing lethal injury so it bleeds to death with those huge canine teeth. And then shearing molars for cutting it up. And look at the flange on the back jaw here. A huge muscle insertion that goes around to the top of the head. On a bear or a lion, they could snap your femur in half. So these are the mammals people go to zoos to see, right? The order Cetacea are fully adapted aquatic mammals, and there's only about 100 species of them. I'd say probably more than half of them are protected and rare and potentially endangered now. Think about this for a minute, though. Whales and dolphins. Back in the Devonian, tetrapods came out of the water. That lobe-finned fish came out of the water and radiated on land, and we've been having tetrapods radiate on land for millions and millions of years. And then one group of mammals said, it wasn't so bad. And they re-evolve for an aquatic niche. Yeah. That's a dolphin skull, and all those sharp teeth, that's about fish catching and holding on to fish. All right, this is a good question for the exam. Are dolphins tetrapods? And you might ask, how are you using that word? Are you using the word descriptively, like small t? Are they tetrapods? Or are they members of the tetrapoda? Right? Two ways to use that word. So if you're using it descriptively, you could argue they're not tetrapods because they don't have 4 legs, right? Mm-hmm. But we don't use the word that way in a biology class. We use it evolutionarily. They are tetrapods because their ancestor was a tetrapod. They lost their legs. So there you go. Artiodactyl, these are the big and medium-sized grazers. Deer and elk and the hoofed animals. And you know, the animals people don't go to the zoo to see. Like a pronghorn here and a deer here. So these are grazers. Trying to think of the range and size. There's some small, like little antelopes in Africa, but these are mostly moderately sized animals. And look at the skull. Again, excellent clues about diet. Teeth up front for clipping, and then basically a grinding structure back here for grinding that plant matter up before you swallow it. And then look at this big, robust jaw here. Like that grinding thing, you go to like a cultural museum like the Pueblo Native Americans, and you see those grain grinders. That's kind of what that's like. And you know, very powerful muscles, but not strength muscles. These are endurance muscles, because you're doing this all day long. And then, likewise, typically not small animals, because the machinery, the digestive machinery you need to process this kind of food is more elaborate than a bear would need for eating meat, or a lion. So we have a more complex, I'd say complex is wrong, yeah, more elaborate digestive system. Oh, another thing, while we're looking here, let's go back here. The eyes of a predator look straight forward. Because he's chasing the prey, he has to grab the prey. He needs to know exactly where it is when he starts reaching for it. Eyes of a prey animal, often here. He's seeing a much broader piece of his world with his eyes. It's just he doesn't see it in 3 dimensions. He sees it very flat. But he can be standing here and he can see the wolf over here. Doesn't have to turn his head. Okay, we saw that in birds too. Like a falcon looks forward, a goose looks to the side. And finally, our order is the order of primates. And again, we get closer and closer to us in any textbook or lecture. We tend to talk in more detail. I thought we'd talk a little bit about primates. Let's see, I'm making a note for myself.
Do any mammals have gastroliths?
Mammals have what?
Gastroliths?
Do mammals have gastroliths? I can't think of any that does. That's a good question, though. I can't think of any. No, I can't. That just sounds weird to me. But okay. Yeah.
Isn't a bezoar similar to a gastrolith?
I have no idea. That's in Harry Potter, though. Those stones. I always thought that was like a disease, like a kidney stone. So primates. We're not a small order. 230 species of us. We're largely a tropical order. There's only a handful of mammal species that have gotten out of the tropics, and one of them is humans. And there's a couple monkey species. There's a monkey in Japan, and there's a monkey you see in the south coast of Spain. But other than that, we're primarily a tropical group or a subtropical group. The early primate niche gives us an idea the early primate anatomy gives us an idea of the niche, and aspects of that niche were new and special, and so primates took off and became a big group. And aspects of that niche are still seen in you today, even though you are not in that ancient primate niche. The ancient primate niche is probably what these little guys are in. These aren't primates, but these are close living relatives of primates called tree shrews. They're little insectivores, and they live in trees, and that's a good word to get in our vocabulary, is tree living. So the early primate niche was a little tree climbing carnivore. And you probably know this word, but let's get it if you don't. Oh, now I have to spell it. I think it's with an E. Maybe that's an I. I'm not a good speller. Arboreal, right? On Arbor Day, you plant trees. I'm not sure the root there, but it must mean trees. The early tree shrews were little arboreal carnivores. So they're running and jumping, they're climbing, they're grabbing. And that niche, well, selection came with those little animals and favored certain aspects of their anatomy. And early primates show certain features that have to do with running, jumping, climbing, grabbing in trees. And you don't do that, but you still show those features to some degree or another. This is a very early primate, recent fossil discovery, reconstruction, skull, little arboreal carnivore. And the primate traits that we look at are, there's a bunch, but I just focused down. We spent a whole semester on primates, I'm sure. Just focused it down, is climbing adaptations. So things like grasping hands. Alone among mammals, alone among vertebrates, you can take your thumb and touch it to every one of your other fingers. You have a gripping hand. Now, some other mammals have gripping hands, but none quite like yours. A squirrel does too, but a squirrel kind of does the whole thing. Watch them sometimes. You can do this. And so these gripping hands are an early primate feature. It's our ancestors' adaptation for climbing. Squirrels went another route, but this is our route. And instead of claws, we have nails. Exact functionality of that, but we went from claws to nails. So we're not grabbing the tree with digging into the claws. We're grasping with our fingertips. The other thing is primates are vision specialists. Again, we see vision specializations in other groups of mammals, but the primate ancestor went a certain route, and there's a couple things we see there. One is the eyes go around to the front of the head. That, we see that in lions. We see that in a lot of carnivores too, but primates took it. So we see in stereo, and you've probably done this little thing, you cover up one eye and you reach for something, everything's flat, you lose your depth perception. And we have really good depth perception, so it's really important for reaching for that branch and knowing exactly where it is, or reaching for that little insect, knowing exactly where it is. And like I mentioned earlier, we also see in color. So our visual system extracts more information than some other mammals use. And consequently, parts of the brain associated with vision in primates become hyperdeveloped. So I put this in here. This is an evolutionary tree for primates. We didn't do it for any of the other orders, and we're not going to do it in detail here. But if you go from top, in this case, to bottom, you go from more distant relatives, well, the humans at the bottom, more distant to more recent. And another way to look at that is the evolutionary separation goes further and further back in time. And I thought I'd just introduce you to some of our cousins. Very low end of the primate world are lemurs and lorises, and they're up here. Very low end. Lemurs, they very primitive primates. In one place on the planet they live other than zoos. Where would you go to see lemurs in the wild?
Madagascar.
Madagascar. Can you picture Africa? That big, long island off the east coast of Africa, it's Madagascar. It's the only place these things live. Islands are time machines. They hold on to cool, primitive stuff. And lorises, I can't remember where lorises come from. They're African, but I couldn't know. Podos and tarsiers. These are low-end primates. And from what I've read, I've never been interested in having a monkey as a pet, but if you have a primate as a pet, you want one of these low-end ones. They're a little bit easier to deal with than the really smart ones, apparently. Not encouraging anyone to have monkeys as pets. When I was a kid, you could go into a pet shop and see monkeys. Haven't seen that in 40 years, probably.
Aren't they illegal to have as pets now?
Probably, in a lot of states, yeah. And, we were wide open in the olden days. I went to pet shops and saw prairie dogs, raccoons, little alligators. Yeah. So anyway, a step up would be New World monkeys. I think you'd see in Central America down into South America, with the nice prehensile tails we like to think of with monkeys. Also in the New World are these small things called marmosets and tamarins. These are small monkeys you see in the rainforests of Amazonia, in Brazil and Ecuador, and places like that. And look, that's someone's thumb and forefinger. Those are juveniles, but they're really, really small, some of them. And when we wipe out rainforests, we take away their habitat. So New World monkeys, Old World monkeys. We're getting into animals with some larger sizes, but also complex social behaviors, like baboons, which live in extended family troops. When I was in grad school, I went to South Africa to do some fish research, and we were in a wilderness area down there collecting fish. And I'm the American who'd never been to Africa before. My South African colleagues, and they were making fun of me the whole time. But it was the coolest thing I ever done. We were collecting fish in a stream, and there was this noise in the forest. And I said, "What is that?" And I said, "That's the baboons yelling at us." That was really cool. They were barking at us. So, old world monkeys. We go to Asia, and we start picking up things called apes, like the orangutan from the rainforests of Indonesia and Borneo, and gibbons. And look at this tree-adapted creature, those enormously long arms. Santa Barbara Zoo has some gibbons. Go look at them. These are forest creatures, and when we take the forest down for coffee plantations or timber, they don't have any place to go. So we're in the ape crowd here. We finally get fairly close to humans. And we get to the great apes, as they're sometimes called. We get to gorillas. And gorillas are African, as you know. Another rainforest creature. They're large, powerful creatures, but they're strictly vegetarians. And they, as one scientist described, they basically spend their lives living in a huge salad bowl of their dinner. They live in family groups with fairly sophisticated behaviors, and people have made them into scary beasts, and they're just not. There's a piece of film somewhere from years ago, back before people weren't filming everything, but someone had a video camera, probably one of these, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was in a zoo, and a little child was at the edge of the gorilla enclosure, and he falls in, and he's lying on the ground stunned. And everyone's screaming and panicking because there's gorillas in there. And this gorilla walks out and she strokes his hair because he's on the ground and he's hurt. And she strokes his hair and she picks him up to take him away from all those scary people who are screaming. And then the zookeeper runs in with a cattle prod.
Oh my.
But but they said, isn't that wonderful that animal showed care for a child? And the gorilla biologist said, that's exactly what we thought would have happened. Did you say Coco died last week? 46. Anyway, we share 99% of our DNA with humans. There's 6 billion of them, and we're nearly extinct. What's the difference? I think that's true. Right now, they're living in parts of Africa where there's tremendous civil strife, and lots of people with guns walking around. The very top end of the primates, right below humans, are the chimps, and what we used to call pygmy chimps, but apparently we're now calling them bonobos. And these are the closest living relatives to humans. I think the bonobos come in a little bit closer when you do the genetic work here. And when we talked about neoteny and pediomorphosis, remember when juvenile forms take on sexual reproduction, you get a new lineage coming from a juvenile. Fetal chimpanzees, I think it's bonobos actually, fetal embryonic bonobos are kind of similar to humans in a way that the adults are not. The skull proportions and other aspects of their body are more human-like than the adult looks. So that's one hypothesis for human origins. I'm looking at the clock here. So, anyway, we finally get to humans, and humans are the animal I'm least interested in. In case you haven't guessed, but we do have a complex history and a deep past, and I assume there's classes in the anthropology department on human origins, right? Have anyone taken those or been aware of? Yeah, so I'm going to leave that to that class, but it's an interesting story. We're in the family Hominidae. We're the only living member of our family, but there's all sorts of fossil members of our family. Our genus is Homo, as in Homo sapiens, right? We're the only living member of our genus, but there are a number of ancient members of our genus in the genus Homo. And just a quick thought process on human origins is this is African. Almost certainly happened in Africa. I think all the evidence points to Africa. And Africa went through a climate change phase. I don't have the date in my mind, but I think it's 15 million years ago, but I don't write that down. Africa went from primarily covered with dense forest, a lot of rainforest and a lot of other kinds of forest, but Africa was primarily forested, dried, and it's more like it is today with expanses of forest but large expanses of grassland. And in that transition is human origins. The early humans, as the forest disappeared, their ancestors, well, a lot of the primates probably went extinct because they lost their tree habitat. But there was one little wing of them that was in a position to transition from tree living to grassland living. And that's the human origin. So as the climate dried. And so we went from apes that walked around on 4 legs or climbed to humans that walk upright on 2 legs. Humans went bipedal at that point, or primates went bipedal. So that's, at least that's probably an oversimplification of that hypothesis. So anyway, we do have a lot of mammals around campus to look at, and if you're out at the right time of day or you're lucky, you see them. Certainly if you live on campus, you hear the coyotes at night, right? That's Coyote canis latrans. It's an opportunistic dog carnivore, medium-sized dog carnivore. They're not native to California. They're native to the other side of the Rockies mostly, but we've modified habitat to such a degree they're out here. We also have a fox. The Southern California red fox, or gray fox, I can't remember which one it is. But, slightly smaller than a coyote. I see these when I'm up doing plant surveys more often than I see coyotes, but neither do I see very often. I've a couple times run upon, yeah, there it is. You can't tell in that picture, but that's a puppy, a big puppy. I was way up above, you can see there's this University Glen there. I was way up in that hill above the enrollment center, and I walked around a corner, and 2 little fox puppies ran away. And I just managed to get that picture before it looked back and looked at me and then disappeared. Let's see, like 4 days after the fire, I had a really close experience with a coyote. I was way up on this hill, and everything had burnt. Everything was gone. All the plants were gone. It was like 5 days after the fire. And I was walking around, and what you saw after that, you saw ash on the ground, and you saw dead animals. You saw dead rabbits and things like that. And I 3 or 4 places I came upon dead fawns, baby deers. But I walked around a big rock up there, and I was this far from a coyote, and it was starving because there was nothing left to hunt. And it had a dead burnt rabbit, and we were about this far apart. And it stared at me almost long enough for me to get my camera out and take a picture of it. But it was looking me right in the face, and it was, I am so hungry, I'm going to fight you for this. Over they just run. But I had that little encounter, and then it disappeared. Dropped the rabbit and ran. I felt bad. Probably really hungry. We do have bobcats on the campus. I have yet to see a living one. Dr. Rodriguez took this picture. This is that park area above University Glen. And for a year or 2, this little gal came out of the hills and would walk around in the mornings, and she'd listen for gophers, and then she'd grab them out of their burrows. I have several times found mountain bobcat skulls, not mountain lions, bobcat skulls up on the habitats, so they're up there. And then random stuff, there's the possum again. You see them occasionally. If you're walking around campus at night, you sometimes see raccoons in the trash cans looking for things. And the deer have moved away from campus. As campus got bigger and more busy, we lost the deer. In the early years, like 2002, 2003, and I was here back then, every morning you'd see deer. Every evening you'd see them. They'd be on the periphery of campus, that big open area. As you drive on campus, there would always be deer in there in the morning and the evening, sometimes 20 or 30 of them. I see deer maybe every 6 or 7 weeks, and I see 1 or 2. And then we have a neat diversity of rodents. And we did our owl pellet lab last week, and almost all the skulls that you were picking out were really small. They were almost certainly little Paramiscus skulls. That's our little field mouse, those little skulls you were getting. And a couple you got a much bigger skull. And most common thing is a neotoma, which is either called a pack rat or a wood rat. And I have one on my back porch in my apartment complex. It's really annoying because anything I put out there he chews up. But they're about this big. They pile up vegetation in a little nest called pack rats. And when you're walking around and you see ground squirrels, that's Spermophilus. Have you seen tree squirrels up in the trees on campus? That's not native. That's Cyrus niger. That's an East Coast squirrel that people brought out here. But it's kind of nice to have. But we did have a native. The native squirrel would have had a native tree squirrel is kind of grayish brown, not that pretty red color. But we did have a native one. But the one from East Coast displaced it. Anywhere there's parks and people, you get the East Coast one. Wilder areas, you get the native one. Anyway. Okay. Random, that's diversity. Diversity and evolution. Kind of random bits of mammal biology. You know what? My voice is disappearing. I'm going to talk loud. I'm going to call it a little bit early. Call it early today. What am I trying to say? I'm going to call it today a little bit early. It's hot out. The sun's come up. I was hoping that the fog would last. It didn't. So it's going to be a little warm down there. Bring a hat. Bring sunscreen if you're a sunscreen person. Either hydrate yourself before you head down, or bring some water. Okay. Good shoes, and we'll see you 1-ish down by the model airplane park. If you don't know what it is, come up and I'll show you.